Welcome to LMC-TV, Meet the Candidates. I'm State Senator George Latimer. In this conversation, we'll be talking with Gary Zuckerman, who is the candidate for Rye Supervisor, and he will be running on the Democratic, Conservative, and Women's Equality parties. Gary, thanks for taking time out to be on the air.
Thank you, George. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Gary, this is a good opportunity for people out in the viewing audience, particularly those who live in the Rye Neck section of Mamaroneck Village, to get to know you a little bit. Folks in Rye Brook know you very well, where you served on the village board. But tell us a little bit about who Gary Zuckerman is.
George, I'm an attorney, and I specialize in real estate. I've served my community in Rye Brook since about 1990. I've been a trustee from 92 to the year 2000, and I've been a planning board member, and I've been the chair since the year 2007. I'm also currently a consultant to Chairman Kaplowitz at the Westchester Board of Legislators, working in his office as a government liaison to local communities.
So a good legal career and a good, obviously, community career as well. Let's just, for everybody's sake who may be watching, and on LMC, we have folks who live in the village of Larchmont and the town of Mamaroneck, but the target audience locally here are the residents of Rye Neck, because they are part of the town of Rye, which also includes the village of Rye Brook and the village of Portchester, and I guess the total something like over almost 40,000 people that reside somewhere in those three villages.
That's correct.
And of course divided by the city of Rye, right in the middle,
That's
which is
right.
not part of the town of Rye. So you put together an interesting ticket this year. So when people go to the polls, they'll be voting for county legislator, they'll be voting for Mamaroneck Village mayor and trustee, but they'll also be voting for Rye Town Supervisor and 2 councilmen. And my understanding is you have a ticket led by a Democrat with a Republican and a Conservative. Tell us about your ticket
correct.
And your running mates.
George, when I decided to run for supervisor, I didn't want it to be the same old thing that we see in politics. We've seen divided government in Washington. We see what goes on there. We see how difficult it is to work across the aisle. And some people just don't want to do it. I know you're not one of them. I know from being with you and talking with you that you yourself have tried to work across the aisle. And in my consulting work in the legislature in White Plains, I know that there are attempts to do that as well with Chairman Kaplowitz. Rye Brook, which I served as a trustee and now planning board chair, has always been a nonpartisan government. Mm-hmm. I believe that in order to get things done, you must reach across the aisle, you must work with people of different parties. And here in the town of Rye, we have different areas that are each different from each other. Rye Brook is different from Portchester, is different from Rye Neck. On my ticket, we have a conservative from Rye Neck, Lindsay Jackson, Tony Baxter, a Republican from Portchester, and I'm a Democrat from Rye Brook. And I believe that by having people expressing their views, both whatever party views, and especially being able to represent each separate area of the town, we will be able to accomplish things where we can eliminate the thought of opposing or being in favor of a position because we're from a certain part of the town or that we represent a certain party. We need to, obviously everybody has differences, but you need to hear those differences out and work with those to achieve a common interest, which is the betterment of the town of Rye.
Now, when we look at national politics, it's pretty obvious there are different philosophies, and the partisanship often reflects that. You served in a local government as a village trustee, and now you're looking to serve in a town government, also a local government. Is there really an ideological difference when you deal with delivery of town services?
I don't think so. I think that there's no place for ideology in local government. We're not dealing with issues that you see on a national front, in terms of these major philosophical issues that we have. Of course, there are differences, and that's where you need to be able to work with other people, work cooperatively with other people. And frankly, I've done that in my whole life as an attorney, as a trustee, as a planning board chair, bringing people together and seeking to accomplish things.
Now, in terms of the town government structure in Rye Town, and obviously every town is a little bit different, the presence of 2.5 villages makes Rye Town unique compared to Mamaroneck Town and Harrison and neighboring towns. What are the basic functions of town government and those those responsibilities that belong to the town uniquely, knowing that the village governments provide or the certain other basic services?
But the town also provides very important services that the residents should be aware of. I know that many people, when they consider where they're living, they'll say, I live in Mamaroneck, I live in Rybrook, I live in Portchester, and that's absolutely true. But the town of Rye provides your assessment services, which is probably one of the most important functions that a government has, is to assess your property upon which your taxes are based. It also collects your taxes. And the town of Rye is responsible for Crawford Park and Rybrook totally, and the supervisor sits as president of the Rye Town Park Commission, which is responsible for the operation of Rye Town Park, which is open to all the residents of, well, both parks are open to all the residents of the town, and we all know, especially for the people here in Rye Neck, Rye Town Park is right next door in the city of Rye and is easily accessible. And by the way, we also have the town also provides a court system, Rye Town Court, and the clerk's function is provided by the town of Rye. Your marriage licenses, your dog licenses, etc., provided by the town of Rye. So there are very, very valuable functions that are in fact provided by the town.
I would think, as you point out those different functions, one that comes to mind immediately, and it isn't totally run by the town, but it has the important voice on the governance of it, is Rye Town Park. People familiar with going to Oakland Beach or Rye Town Park Beach,
Correct.
Enjoying that experience, and now we have pavilions outside of the restaurant there, Seaside Johnny's. What's your process assessment if you go on to become supervisor about what you'd like to do at Rye Town Park?
Well, Rye Town Park is one of our 2 park gems in the town of Rye. Unfortunately, it has been allowed to deteriorate over the years. And there's a magnificent building there that's virtually unused. We have bathrooms that need to be renovated so that the people who go to the beach can enjoy them. Basically, we need some reinvestment. We have certain, ramps, for example, have been talked about to repair for years and years and years, and they have not. It's time to formulate a plan. And there was, in fact, a citizens committee set up a couple of years ago to formulate a plan to improve the park. It was never acted upon. That's what we need, not only a plan, but then we need to act upon it. What I call is strategic reinvestment. We're not looking to spend a fortune of money, unless, of course, I can persuade our state senator and state assemblyman to find some money for us.
Oh, no, state governor.
Which, and the governor as well, but which I have no problem asking. Right. But it does need reinvestment, and we need to make it the gem that it was years ago, so that all the people, not only today, but the people in future generations can enjoy the parks. It's very, very important. And by the way, Crawford Park is in the same situation. I know that the people in Rye Neck don't really use it as much as the people in Rybrook and Portchester, but and I'm talking to the people of Rybrook and Portchester as well, because I hope this airs on TV there. Crawford Park is also a gem. The mansion is in need of repair. There are plans to do partial repairs, doors, bathrooms, etc. It, like Rye Town Park, needs an overall plan going forward, a 2-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, where we could find appropriate financing without excessive costs. But the parks are like our homes. Every homeowner in the town knows you need to keep your home in good repair, and you need to make appropriate renovations when they're necessary. The parks are the same way. We need to do that. Otherwise, they lose their value to the entire town.
When you take Rye Town Park as one element, one function of the Rye Town government, but you step back a little bit, overall, what are some of the new ideas that you're envisioning bringing to the fore if you're elected town supervisor?
Well, in the area, for example, of assessment. Assessment is one of the most important functions that the town provides. And what I've noticed this year especially, and this is one of the reasons that I decided to run for supervisor, there have been tremendous spikes in value in both Rye Brook and Rye Neck in neighborhoods that are virtually unaccounted for. And I'm not saying the assessor is doing a terrible job, but I think the practices need to be looked into as to what happens there. For example, if you have in the same neighborhood a home that's gone up 15% and another home that's gone up 8% without any reason, for example, construction, you need to look into it. The assessor needs to look into any home or any business for that matter, that spikes to an excessive degree over the average of that particular neighborhood. Mm-hmm. We've noticed that the protests for assessed value by homeowners has gone up by about a third this year over last year. And there's a reason for that. They're dissatisfied with the process. So the process needs to be looked at. It also needs to be more transparent. With me, transparency is a big item in government. Mm-hmm. The problem, one of the problems is that there's a date by which the assessment roll must be published. There's no reason that we have to publish that roll on the last day. We can publish that roll earlier. It's permitted. Make it accessible on the web so people can understand what their values are and have time to protest it if they so decide to protest it. Mm-hmm. I heard complaints that they got that residents got their notices later than they should have. If they had the ability to seek their values earlier, that would not have been a problem. Mm-hmm.
Let's broaden it a little bit too, because I think in the area of assessment, it's a very important function of the government, but for most people there are other things that are more accessible to them. And I know you want to make some of these services more accessible to people. Certainly down in Rye Neck, you feel a sense of distancing from where the physical presence of Rye Neck is and the physical presence of the town offices. You have some plans along those lines.
Absolutely. One of the things that we want to look at is to set up a satellite collection office for the collection of taxes mm-hmm. at least a couple of times during the year, so that the people of Rye Neck can go to, for example, the village office in Mamaroneck and pay their town taxes. Town taxes means not just the town tax, but your school tax and your county tax as well. It's, to use a colloquial, it's a schlep for some people to go from Rye Neck to Grace Church Street in Port Chester. Mm-hmm. And I know that many, many people pay their taxes through their mortgage escrow arrangements with their bank. But there are many people, especially our seniors, who come into the tax office and like to pay the tax with a check, by hand, and they feel that that's the best way to do it for them. We want to make it easier, not just for Rye Neck, but also Rye Brook people have to go to Grace Church Street in Port Chester. Mm-hmm. So we want to make it easier for people to be able to pay their taxes, as well as the assessment process itself.
And would you consider having other outsourced time and hours in Rye Neck, other things that people, when they apply to the clerk's office for certain permits and stuff?
Absolutely.
Would that make sense to do that as well?
Yeah, for people who want to do that in person. And we want to increase the web presence. There should be nothing that cannot be paid over the internet mm-hmm. or licenses that can be applied for over the internet. We want to make town government more accessible to the residents, more easy to understand, more easy to use. Whatever the function are, the clerk's function, obviously, to improve the courts. One of the things that I would do if elected is I would sit down with the clerk, with the receiver of taxes, with the judges of the court and say, how can the town make it better for you to operate your office? And I would meet with people throughout the town, Rye, Rybrook, Portchester. What can we do to make it easier and more accessible for you to approach the town, to do whatever functions you need to do with the town? I think that town government, village government is the closest government to the people, and we need to make it as accessible as possible.
And nowadays it seems that more and more pieces of information about what's happening, communications are being shared online. Do you have some thoughts about
Yes.
what the town might do in terms of its online presence?
Yeah, one of the things that I found is that the town of Rye has, although it has a website with information on it, one thing it doesn't have, it doesn't publish its agendas timely. When you have a meeting, when something's going to happen at a town meeting, the residents have a right to know as early as possible, at least a few days beforehand, what's on the agenda. They also should have the ability to look at the documents. If the town is considering a contract, for example, that contract the draft contract should be published. People might want to say, look at what the proposed contract says, how much it's going to cost, what the terms are. They may wish to come to a public hearing and comment on it. All of those things should be made accessible online at an early date. Most of our villages have that. Rybrook, Mamaroneck, Portchester all publish their agendas and their documents online. There's no reason why the town of Rye can't do that.
Well, and as people sit and relax at home, hopefully they can see the proceedings of the town government, the town board, and perhaps some of the other committees as well that exist within the town, advisory committees and jurisdictions. Gary, you spent...
Let me just interrupt you
please,
for
go
one
ahead.
thing. You bring up an interesting point. Along with publishing documents, we should have streaming video of the meetings as they occur and have them accessible to people who are not at their computers when the meetings occur. They should be able to see them the next day. I noticed that some of the meetings in the last month or so, or two or 3 months, are not even up online yet. So we need to make that accessible to all the residents.
And just to build off of that a little bit, as you look at the functioning of town government, the communications function and so forth, is there any sense that you have about how you would tie in the experiences you've had having been on the planning board in your village in Rye Brook? Land use issues are the ones that you hear most talked about. Portchester as a village is dealing with Starwood United Hospital. In Mamaroneck Village, there's issues of Mamaroneck Beach and Yacht Club. You've had issues in Rye Brook as well, but you served on that board for 8 years. I've heard it said that being on the planning board is harder than being on the local council, whatever it is, because it's contention over development. What out of that experience do you think helps you prepare yourself to be a better town supervisor?
I think that all of my experience being on different boards has taught me one thing: the ability to listen. For example, on a planning board, or even when I was on the Rye Brook Board of Trustees, the Board of Trustees was the approval authority on most of the development. For example, Belfair, I was on the board when we approved Belfair development. You have a lot of different opinions. A developer will come before you and put forward his plan. There might be opposition. There might be opposition from residents. Consultants may have an opinion that agree or disagree. In order to go forward, you need to rationalize all of these different views. Some views are fact-based, some views are not fact-based, and you need to listen to all of the opinions, not only of the people in front of you as you're sitting up there on, in front of the dais, but also your fellow council members, many of whom might have a different opinion than you do. And that's one reason that I'm really proud to be running with people who are of a different party. Because, frankly, they're going to be talking to residents who are not necessarily familiar with me, they're familiar with them. If you have somebody all of one party, whether it's Republican or Democrat, they tend to talk within themselves. They tend to go to the same gatherings. But when you have different parties, you're talking to people who represent a different base. You're getting a different viewpoint. And when you get a different viewpoint, you can make a better decision. And that's what it's all about, is making good decisions.
What do you hear out there when you're going door to door? You're out there in the campaign mode. I know the experience very well. If you go to the train station, you may have only a snippet of time. But when you meet somebody at their front door, you're meeting them in a comfort zone. And if they want to talk, what are they talking about?
They're talking about taxes more than anything else. They
Property
talk about
taxes,
property taxes. They're talking about property taxes, property taxes, property taxes. They're talking about their assessments, those of them whose assessments have gone up. What can you do about it? And they're, obviously, that's the main thing on people's mind today.
Do they recognize that the town portion of property taxes in Rye Town is practically nothing?
They don't particularly recognize that. The figure that I've seen is that the town tax, yearly tax, is per parcel is about $24.50, which is
And
about
that's the total cost, not just how much it went up in a given year.
No. That's the total cost of your town tax per year, which is about the same as going to a movie, a couple going to a movie. In fact, it may be less depending on the movie. So, I don't think a lot of people understand that, but after all, the money that people pay in taxes, it's coming out of the same pocket. There's school tax, your village tax, your town tax, your county tax. It's all coming out of the same pocket. It's all based on your assessment, by the way. And people are concerned. Everybody's concerned about making government efficient. And I am too. There are efficiencies that we can go further in. I know that the current administration has made some efficiencies over the last few years, but there's a lot more that can be done that we've seen. In the supervisor's office, for example, and in how the books are kept. One of the things that we found is that exemptions, real property, sometimes you have exempt property. And when the exemptions come off the property, the new homeowner, for example, if a veteran was living there or passed away, the exemption is off. They now have to be billed for the full tax. And we found that, for example, the town has been taking that money and putting it in its general fund when, in my estimation, it should be going, for example, to the schools or the villages in the same proportion as the normal tax rate, which would help reduce the school tax rate, the village tax rate, by a certain percentage. And that's where the big money is especially in the schools.
Now, you've lived in the town for a long, long time. You've seen a lot of changes, the creation of Rybrook out of what was unincorporated town, development certainly in Rybrook, as you mentioned, Belfair, office complexes and so forth. When you look down the road, the term of office is 4 years if you're elected, but the time rolls on. How do you see the town playing out in 10 years and in 15 years, given the fact you've got this highly dense reality in Portchester, very changing demographics? You have sort of a classic, mature suburban area in Rye Neck, and then you have this growth area in Rybrook. They're three very different situations.
They are. Well, George, as you mentioned at the very beginning, most of the decisions are made on the village level. The town does not have a large role. The town government itself does not have a large role in land use decisions. What it does have, though, it is a legitimate government, and one of the things that it can do is work with the villages to develop projects. For example, under the Community Development Block Grant program that is now run by the state, an application is entitled to more money if it is submitted by more than one municipality. In other words, if it affects more than one municipality, so that the town of Rye can partner with the village of Mamaroneck, the village of Rybrook, the village of Portchester, and actually the project that is being applied for will actually be entitled to more funding than it would be if the villages applied on their own.
There's that opportunity for consolidation as well. And many folks have argued that it is the town government that really is the unit under which consolidation can occur. And you do see already Rybrook and Portchester have some unique coordinated services. Rybrook contracts with Portchester for fire services. They both jointly run a library.
That's correct.
The Portchester Library, which is a free association library, but both of those two governments contribute to it. This entity itself, LMC-TV, is a combination of the village of Mamaroneck, village of Larchmont, and town of Mamaroneck, and that is a consolidated service where in other places there are three standalone television entities and so forth. I assume you're on the lookout for other opportunities like that as you go through
Anybody involved in government needs to be on the lookout for opportunities to consolidate services. The town of Rye is in a unique position to become almost a super IMA, intermunicipal agreement, because it encompasses the three villages without taking away from the independence of the villages. I know that there was talk of dissolution of the town. There had also, if you'll remember, the Westchester 2000 study done by Dr. Prezioso back in the 1990s advocated the elimination of the villages in favor of the town. Right. The reality is that the villages are not going to dissolve, and we've already been through a discussion about the dissolution of the town, which I think is behind us. But the reality is that the town of Rye can be a vehicle for cooperation among the 2 or 3 villages, depending on what the project would be. And I think that's important.
We've got 30 seconds left. Tell us why people, when they go into the voting booth, should vote for you for Rye Town Supervisor in 30 seconds.
They should vote for me and for my team because we bring a new face to the politics of this area, nonpartisan, interested only in one thing, accomplishing goals. Some of the goals of which I have set out, others we're looking into, but there's not enough time to go into them all. But we believe that we can move the town of Rye forward for the benefit of all of the residents in a nonpartisan way.
We've been talking with Gary Zuckerman, who is on the ballot this November 3rd, running for Rye Town Supervisor on the Democratic, Conservative, and Women's Equality lines. Gary, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, George.
And
I appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. Make sure you vote on Tuesday, November 3rd. I'm George Latimer, State Senator. Have a great day.